Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the stage, Clarice Turner.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone had a great time last night, and welcome to day 2 of the Almond Conference. I would like to ask you to please look at your programs carefully because there's lots of content, very rich content today, and we've assembled a great lineup of hot topics and speakers and special events over the next 2 days. So please take advantage and attend what seems most germane to you. There's lots of great stuff out there. I'd like to give a huge thank you this morning to the sponsor of this session, Farm Credit. Let's give him a hand, please. Thank you, Farm Credit. And I'd also like to thank our medal sponsors again, AMVT LLC, Burrell, Tomra, Cusify, Bayer Crop Science, Trical Group, Sataki, BM&M Screening Solutions, BASF, and the Ag Center. Thank you so much for your sponsorship once again. All right, I have the great pleasure of introducing one of our ABC players who is fantastic, full of knowledge, and so passionate about this industry. I've gotten to know him over the last 3 months, and I've been super impressed with how he represents you and how he represents your interests back to the Almond Board in terms of what's most important and what can drive grower value. I realize that today there's a tough environment out there, that cost pressures are significant, and this morning's session is designed to help support you in connecting the dots on funding opportunities that could be helpful to you. So to guide you through this discussion, the one and only Jesse Roseman will join me on the stage. Welcome, Jesse, and thank you for all you do for the growers and for the Almond Board.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Clarice.
You're welcome.
And I will say, I really want to take this opportunity to welcome you to the almond community and really appreciate having you in this role. So thank you. Good morning. With the continued low pricing, growers are looking for any help that can improve their financial situation. So the ongoing availability of incentive funding from state, federal, and other government agencies should be attractive since it has the potential to make a big deal and a big difference in moving ahead with desired projects, helping with cash flow, and helping with the overall bottom line. At the same time, incentives have gotten increasingly more complicated and complex, and that's especially with the recent development of block grants to third parties. So funds don't always come through a single agency, and it can definitely be confusing. Good news is that ABC wants to help navigate this complexity, including with the speakers that we have on the panel today. First up, we have Kelli Evans with Evans Farming. And Kelli's an ABC board member, consultant, great value to the industry, and she helps both growers and facilities with grants and incentives. Next, we've got Caddie Bergren with UCA&R Climate Smart Agriculture Program. The UCA&R program, along with many great agencies, are in the incentive zone outside, so hopefully you've taken some time to explore, but definitely come visit her and her colleagues at the table there. Next, we've got Aaron Fukuda with Tulare Irrigation District. Aaron's on the front lines of implementing SGMA, and he has a really unique perspective on what qualifies as an incentive. Next, Roger Isom with the Western Agricultural Processors Association. He'll be very familiar, I think, to a lot of people here in the room, and he's a master, I would say, of San Joaquin Valley Air District funding. And then last, we've got Jesse Baum with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and really grateful we've got him here because NRCS looks to receive a large amount of funding over the next few years, and we want to make sure that growers have as good a chance as possible at receiving some of that. So one of the things that the board of directors of the Almond Board has recognized is the need to make incentives more accessible and understandable, as Clarice said, particularly in these difficult economic times. We're moving purposefully ahead with several steps to make applying for incentives easier and receiving grants more successful. We have a reconfigured website at almonds.com/incentives. We're holding this breakfast session. This is the second year that we've had the incentive zone to encourage connections between growers, facilities, and grant providers, including those block grants that I talked about, which can be really hard to understand and navigate. We put out industry articles and podcast episodes, and then we also share information on the best practices that we learn about from our researchers and put into guides. And then that is helpful for developing new grant programs for the agencies that we're going to discuss today. Lastly, ABC is going to continue to explore this world of incentives to maximize the opportunities and connections that you can make. Agencies have a wide range of incentives that can help on-farm. They're intended to help growers improve economically as they improve the environment and as they improve their communities. They can help make the world better by how you farm and are intended to support environmental improvement, sustainability, and increasingly what they care about are reducing greenhouse gases or sequestering carbon. We know that growers, you've made a lot of progress, whether it's on water use efficiency, reducing dust, improving pest management. These practices that collectively you could call saving the earth are fantastic messages that our marketing team can take and publicize, as we heard about yesterday, and ultimately move product. And just as an idea of what the scale of these incentives are, over $200 million has come into the valley just for air quality alone. What we're seeing is that the funding could be coming from two directions. The first are direct grants. These are programs that you're probably very familiar with from CDFA, NRCS, and the San Joaquin Valley Air District. We go back. Thank you. One thing to think about with these direct grants is they're available throughout the almond growing region, which is really important and simple. Nevertheless, agencies can have multiple programs, and sometimes multiple agencies can have the same programs, such as whole orchard recycling or healthy soils. Good news is experts are available to help. We've got a lot of them here. We've got several of them on the panel today. Now, the next thing, and maybe more confusing, are government grants that pass through a third party. And the Pollinator Alliance has one of these. They're in the incentive zone. Blue Diamond Growers got one of these with the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities. And then American Farmland Trust also has an RCPP, or a Regional Conservation Partnership Program grant, where they get the money, as you can see in the diagram, and then they distribute it to the growers and facilities. The thing to think about with these is they may only apply for certain counties or regions or practices. Again, many agencies or some of these block grant recipients may also provide them. So it's up to you to make the connection, talk to them, and decide for yourself which one you want to work with or apply for. Again, we've got the incentive zone. Here's a list of all the organizations and agencies that are here. So this is just the appetizer. We're going to hopefully whet your appetite with what opportunities are out there. And then the main course is going and meeting with people, making your application, and hopefully you'll make it to the dessert, which is when you actually get funded to do something. To help you navigate the organizations that are here, we've got the keys on the table. If there's a practice, the practices are across the top. The agencies are along the side, so if there's something in particular that you're interested in, you can just scan it and see who's offering what. And then if there's something that you have a question about, whether it's on irrigation, cover crops, nutrient applications, whole orchard recycling, groundwater recharge, definitely pick up one of our guides at the Almond Board booth. And then today or this morning, if you have a question, there are Post-it notes at your table. Just feel free to grab one, write it down, hold it up in the air, and one of the ABC staff will come by and pick it up. So with that, I just want to thank you again for being here, and I want to bring up our first speaker, Kelli Evans.
Hi, so you're probably wondering why am I here on this panel, right? Like, I figured I'd give you a little background of why I was chosen to be on this panel. So currently, I farm 17 acre, I've been farming for 17 years. We farm in Northern California. We have almonds, rice, walnuts, and tomatoes. I have a consulting company. So I work with growers all over the state of California. We help from every program, if it's through a government agency, a private agency, federal and state. I sit on a lot of boards, so that kind of keeps me up to date on what's happening on the industry. So some of the programs we specialize in are from equipment, cover crops, compost. We essentially do also government regulations, and essentially sitting down with your farm and figuring out how can I put these programs together to fit my whole farm operation? How can I make my farm more efficient as a whole? So making sure maybe we need to take advantage of some programs to get us to be compliant with government regulations, and really maximizing those dollars on our farm and those practices that we may already do or could tweak to do and would help our operation. I didn't want to take up too much time. I want to leave enough time for questions. So I'm going to pass it on to Caddie.
So next we've got Caddie Bergren with the UC A&R program, Climate Smart Ag.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caddie Bergren. I work for UC Cooperative Extension based in Merced County, but I'm part of a statewide program that does climate smart agriculture education across the state. So today I'm going to be talking about the CDFA, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, Climate Smart Ag Incentives programs that are available. So there's many different incentives programs through CDFA right now. The two that I'm going to focus on today are the direct grants, so the grants that you as a grower can apply to directly with CDFA, and those are the Healthy Soils Program and the State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program, which is more commonly known as SWEEP. So this is going to be a really whirlwind, very quick overview. I think we'll have some more time for questions and discussions later on, and we also have a booth outside if you have any really specific questions about these programs. So this is going to be just a quick overview. So Healthy Soils Program, it's a grant that's available to all California farmers and ranchers. It lasts for 3 years, so you can get paid to do the same practice 3 years in a row, and it's up to $200,000 over the course of those 3 years. It encompasses many, many different soil health practices. The most common that I've seen for almond growers, I've listed up here on my slides. That would be compost application, cover cropping, hedgerows, whole orchard recycling, etc. But there's many, many different practices you can choose from, and it's mix and match. So you can just do one practice, or you could combine as many as you'd like on your farm. So how does this work? It's an online application. It's pretty simple. It's opening up in January 2024. I think my slide is wrong. It's January 2024. And it will be first come, first serve. So this is great timing for you all to hear about it today so that you can be ready to go and we can get you ready to apply right when it opens sometime in January. It's a flat rate reimbursement grant, so generally the practices all have a flat rate per acre tied to them, and people always ask me what those numbers look like, so I put a few examples up here on the slide so you can get a sense for that. So for example, compost is $64 a ton reimbursement. $860 an acre whole orchard recycling, and there's a whole list that we can give you of all those payment rates. And it's a pretty simple grant, so CDFA just requires you to submit a yearly organic matter sample to them, soil organic matter sample, and then photo verification, so just send pictures to them to prove that you're actually doing the practices that you say you are. And then SWEEP. SWEEP is a very, very popular program, and for good reason. They pay for a lot of different irrigation upgrades. And again, this is perfect timing for you to hear about this because the application actually just opened yesterday, and it's not first come, first serve. So this is just gonna be an application window, and you have until January 26th to work on this and get that submitted. So this is also great timing to be thinking about that. It's also like Healthy Soils, up to $200,000 as a grant. And all you have to do in your project is to prove that you're saving water and saving energy. It has to do both. So you can do that with a number of combination of different things, but a couple examples I put up here, really common, you know, like a flood to drip or micro conversion, or even like a solid set to drip or micro, replacing old pumps with more efficient ones, VFDs. Solar panels has been really common in the past, although that's going to be a little bit more difficult in this current cycle of SWEEP to get funded for solar panels. And soil moisture sensors, weather stations, that kind of thing are also really common. They fund many, many other different irrigation system components, but again, you just have to show that you're saving water and saving energy. So I figured, since a lot of folks will be really interested in this program right now and it's open, if you're interested in applying in the next month and a half, the 3 things you need to get together to get started would be recent pump efficiency tests on any pumps that you want as part of your project, 12 months of energy records, so that would be your electric bills or diesel receipts, and then obviously quotes and bids from vendors for the project that you're interested in. So these are both the grants that are available directly from CDFA. In addition to that, and we'll talk about it more later, there will be some block grant funding for Healthy Soils and SWEEP, which organizations will be giving out individually. So things like RCDs and other organizations have SWEEP and Healthy Soils money as well, and we have a list of those, and we actually have some of those organizations here with us outside today, so you can connect with them and also apply to that if you're interested. So if you're interested in any of these programs, so like I said, I work as part of a team. There's 10 of us across the state that were hired to provide support around these programs. So we are funded by the state, so it's free assistance to all of you to come, and we can help you write the application. We can help you if you get funded with dealing with, you know, invoicing and paperwork with CDFA, or, you know, you can even come in if you have questions about what kind of cover crop mix to use, that kind of thing. So again, we're a resource for you guys. I really encourage you to reach out. That's what we're here for. We have this map and all of our contact information on some flyers out in the booth, so definitely encourage you to come and talk to us if you're interested. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Aaron Fukuda from Tulare Irrigation District.
Good morning, everybody, and I really want to thank the Almond Board for inviting me here. I'm going to be the odd duck in the crowd, and I don't have any money to offer, but if any of you are interested, I have water to offer. So let me explain a little program that we have going. It was something that we put together for Sigma compliance, and it was not seen favorably. The joke was if Aaron survived and was still employed in 2022, that was a miracle. And then we hit 2023, and that disincentive turned into an incentive tool. So to give you a little bit of landscape and where I'm from, we are located, I am the interim general manager of the Mid-Cahuilla GSA. The important term in there is interim. I'm seeking a general manager. The Mid-Cahuilla GSA is a 440,000 acre, we're in the Cahuilla subbasin, it's 440,000 acres, and the Mid-Cahuilla is 100,000 acres. Of that, our partners are the city of Visalia and the city of Tulare. I also am the general manager of the Tulare Irrigation District, which is a 65,000 acre irrigation district. We're one of the oldest irrigation districts in the state. We were formed in 1889. We run 300 miles of an earthen canal system. And we have 1,300 acres of recharge basins. So Sigma looked like something we've been doing historically because we're a conjunctive use irrigation district. But as you know, we still all had shortages. And during the drought, our groundwater levels were at our all-time lows, and our growers were concerned with that. So in 2022, our incentive program began as me looking like the evil guy coming out, and our compliance was, I'm here to help you. I'm going to allocate groundwater to you. I'm going to restrict that groundwater pumping, and then we're going to charge you for that groundwater. So I was not very popular in 2022, trust me. But I think as we got through that, and I made sure that I was talking to my growers, bringing them in, my cell phone is always strapped to me, and we had all of these conversations were a 2-hour conversation. The first hour was yelling at me about how this was unfair, and then the second hour is about how do we get this thing done. We got it put in place in 2022. We did see some groundwater savings in 2022. We reduced our evapotranspiration by about 13% in our irrigation district, which was about 20,000 acre-feet of groundwater savings. I'm not going to go into too much detail of the blocks here, but we allocate groundwater in blocks. We charge for those blocks, and we have 2 classifications: groundwater dependent users, which in our world are called white areas, and then surface water users, which are my district guys. So there is a differential. We developed a water dashboard so growers can track it. We can allocate. They see it on their dashboard, on their phones, on their computers, and then they can see a monthly time step of how much water they're using. If they go over, they hit the mitigation block or the penalty tier. The penalty tier is significant, not in the dollars, but in the water loss. If you go into a penalty tier, you're charged $500 an acre foot, and you lose 1 acre foot per acre foot that you go over in the future. Just be known that my grower self-inflicted that penalty. I had what was called a coffee shop committee that helped me develop a lot of this. The reason we did a coffee shop committee is one of my growers said, "Aaron, you're the SOB. Literally, they're talking about you nonstop, and you need to start sitting down and talking with them." So I formed a coffee shop committee, and they put these restrictions in place, self-inflicted, because they knew they had to slow down. Well, that's what 2022 looked like, right? And around this time in 2022, I was going around the state talking about how we were going to manage our deficit through this allocation program. And then this showed up, right? Literally within a couple months, I was shifting gears and figuring out how we were going to move from drought to floods. And in the Tulare Lake, we were dealing with some significant issues. Well, we fired up what we know best. We fired up our recharge ponds, right? And we have 1,300 acres of them. The groundwater that goes into the system gets allocated to the growers, so they don't have to worry about that. But where we saw our growers see this disincentive as an incentive was in what we call winter irrigation. Around the state, there's a lot of people calling it things like on-farm, agmar. There's a lot of different terminologies. In Tulare Irrigation District, it's simply flood irrigation. And we say the most efficient farmer is one that can drip in drought and flood in wet. So our guys fired up and gals fired up everything they could because they recognized that whatever was put in on their fields above the evapotranspiration we're tracking showed up as a groundwater credit on their water dashboard. So I have some early numbers coming in. We diverted our highest record diversion into our irrigation district, 414,000 acre feet. Again, remember, we're only 65,000 acres, so small postage stamp with a lot of water coming in. And the bigger record was how much was diverted to our growers in the field. So 190,000 acre feet went out to the growers. They over-applied, put it in the ground, and we're beginning to see the results of that with our groundwater levels shooting up. These were earlier in the summer, around mid-August, so our new readings are coming in even higher than this, a few feet higher. What this did do is we took a look at the water dashboard. Is we have a lot of growers with credits now, and some of these growers have credits more than they need. So we are propping up a pilot water market in the next, hopefully, 60 days, and it allows those growers that have too many credits to sell it to others that may need it. One grower said, he just took it up as a challenge and put a ton of water in the ground. And so now he's sitting with, arguably too many credits. And what he's going to do is he's got some other maintenance needs he needs in his fields, or he's going to put in another efficiency project like a drip system or maybe convert some pipeline. Well, he's going to sell some of that groundwater credit to others that need it to balance out, and he'll use that money for his efficiency project. So again, I want to thank you. I think we're living proof that sometimes things don't look so good, but I know farmers, like I was talking with Roger, if I give you guys a piece of duct tape and a screwdriver, you're gonna make something beautiful out of it. We took this disincentive program and turned it into an incentive program. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Great job, yeah. Next, we've got Roger Isom with the Western Agricultural Processors Association. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Jesse. Losing my mic here. Under those lights, I feel like a chicken McNugget. Hopefully that still works. I'm going to talk about some air pollution incentives. It's going to be at a very high level. I know the San Joaquin Valley Air District has a booth out here, so if you've got more specific questions, I know they'll be here to answer some questions for you. So let me talk about the ones specific to San Joaquin Valley, but some of these will actually go to some of the other air districts out here. So from the San Joaquin Valley Air District side of it, you've got low dust harvesters, you've got some shaker sweeper combination units that they're going to start funding, obviously ag tractors, ag pumps or irrigation pumps, zero emission UTVs to replace our old ATVs, and then talk about a little bit about ag burn alternatives. On the low dust harvesters, and this is one I know the almond board's been big on supporting and encouraging out there. Right now you can get 50% of the eligible cost up to $150,000. So very significant. If you're within Shafter, you can actually get up to 75%. What I'm going to tell you is this next year, there's going to be some enhancements made that will expand this. To what all it will cover, I can't say right now. The percentage is going to go up to some degree. To what part, I don't know yet. We're going to be negotiating and talking with the district here in the next couple of months. But I'm going to tell you, it's going to get better. I will tell you that EPA just announced there's $10 million additional funding specifically coming to San Joaquin Valley Air District just for low dust harvesters. So got a couple months probably before that gets finalized, but it is going to enhance it and make it even more attractive for you guys out there. On ag irrigation pumps, we've done a pretty good job on replacing those already. But the percentage now to go from diesel to a tier 4, or if you can, diesel to electric, is 85% of the cost they'll pay. And what's more important, and this wasn't when we were really pushing this back in the day, is that they'll pay 50% of the line extension. And it has a pretty high number. So before we were limited maybe to 1 or 2 poles or lines, we can go a lot farther now with the incentive monies that the district will provide. On the tractor side, and this is really a positive story for everybody in here. Number one, they pay a big chunk of the money for us to go to a new Tier 4 tractor, Tier 4 final, or if you can, and it's only really in the lower horsepowers, go to electric, but they will pay for that. Here is their incentive rates. And from 450, and I've left a dollar sign off there, but up to 725 on the large horsepower. But you got to know, as a grower in San Joaquin Valley, you came this close to being forced under a mandatory replacement rule like the truck rule. But we had to replace over 12,500 tractors and get 11 tons reductions by the end of this year, or you were going to be under a mandatory rule. Well, the good news is, just last week in Modesto, it was announced that we had met that goal. So we don't have to replace it. That's right. You guys should all be complimented, everybody that replaced a tractor, because it really helps stave off yet one more regulation in California. It's not to say they're not going to try it again somewhere down the road, and I'm sure EPA is going to tighten the standards and it'll come back to us. But for now, huge accomplishment, and hopefully we can keep that money coming to replace those tractors. UTVs, this is one that has really gained popularity. We've run out of money every time they allocate money towards it, but there is money available, and that's to go to an electric UTV. 75% of the cost right now. It is capped at $13,500, and I know some of the dealers, Polaris has jacked their prices up, way up there, but they're only going to pay up to $13,500 right now. So hopefully that's something that'll still be attractive, and you can get some of your equipment replaced out there. Last item I want to talk about is ag burn, and this is going to be a tough one because we're going to run out of money sometime in 24, probably by the summer. But we got $180 million from the state to help us basically for chipping and incorporation. 30 million of it was for new equipment. Then that equipment was really for the guys that in the vines where they have the metal poles and the wire in there where we had to get that out of it. That $30 million is gone. So now we're working on the 150 paid directly to the farmers. And this is what they'll pay for out there. So, you know, for chipping and incorporation, 600. Chipping, if you're not incorporated, it's 300. If you use an air curtain burner, which has become pretty popular, it's $1,000 an acre. If you use the chips or go off site for beneficial reuse, they'll pay you 600. And if you're a small farmer, you get a little $400 add-on. So it's, again, pretty attractive. Just unfortunate. I think we're going to run out of money. It's going to be a big challenge for us going forward because we really haven't replaced the biomass plants which used to take that material. So a challenge for us, but those are, again, just kind of a highlight of the incentives and the air districts out there. And I know Jesse's probably got some questions on this later, but just want to thank you guys for the opportunity to talk about this and encourage you guys to take advantage of these.
Thanks, Roger. Yep. Thank you, Roger. And he is correct. After Jesse, we will have a discussion.
Well, hello, everyone. Thanks for coming today. So with our programs, I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. I'm the state air quality specialist here in the state for California. We offer a variety of financial assistance, much of what Roger and everyone else up here has talked about already. You know, we have equipment replacement. We have, through our Environmental Quality Incentives Program, this is kind of our umbrella program, like where we have, this is where producers are coming in, inefficient irrigation systems, you know, maybe you need that cover crop out there or that whole orchard recycling. That's the typical program that most people are coming in and know us about. We have a conservation stewardship program, which is like that step above, you know, you're already doing a great job out there on your land, and then so it has incentives to help you do more. You know, maybe extending buffers, doing stuff like that. You know, then we also have our Regional Conservation Partnership Program. This program is, you know, driven by partners, as Jesse mentioned earlier. This program, we have a pollinator partnership right now, which is $1.7 million in funding. And that program is, you know, you can come into any one of our offices. We have 55 in the state, you know, basically one in nearly every county. But with that, we've gotten a lot of money. You know, we've gotten a lot of investment. Inflation Reduction Act has really provided us a lot of money to assist you with conservation on the ground. You know, we've gotten about double the funds. And Inflation Reduction Act is just another, you know, way for us to spend funds through EQIP and IRA with a direct focus with greenhouse gas and carbon sequestration. So very seamless implementation. We have about $213 million over the next 4 years in funding for that program, $55 million in conservation stewardship program, $16 million in regional conservation partnership program, in the $92 million. So with NRCS, we have a conservation plan. Like, so when you come into our field offices, you're gonna work with a soil conservationist. You know, typically we have an engineer, sometimes a biologist at our offices, and forester, range cons. So there's a lot of things that can help you develop a plan specific to your farm. And we also have our agricultural conservation easement program. And this program, like if you're interested in preserving your farm long-term, it kind of gives you a little bit of incentive to do that. So we have an ag land easement, which you're keeping the ag land rights of the property, but it maintains working farms. And what that does, it just buys the developmental rights of the property to keep farming and farming. You know, for our top practices that we use on almond farms are mostly micro irrigation, irrigation water management, cover crops, IPM, and mulching. You know, we do a lot of equipment replacement. I mean, our program isn't as big as the district, but we have about $20 million this year for equipment replacement, which is, can be low dust harvesters. Any tier 0, 1, or 2 equipment that you're changing out can be changed out in that program. Any ag equipment, I should say. And so there's going to be this handout downstairs at our booth, and it gives you a little more information about applying. FSA's right out front. If you haven't worked with Farm Services Agency, definitely something you want to do is get out there and talk to them, because that's your starting point. I'm sure many of you have worked with our FSA and NRCS offices, but the map there on the right kind of shows our application deadline. Apologies, is February 16th for our EQIP, IRA, and our NACI program. So our National Air Quality Initiative for equipment replacement is February 16th. So definitely want to get in. We have an open application deadline as well. So as Aaron mentioned earlier, NRCS is helping provide some assistance with recharge. We've done a recharge pilot with some of the irrigation districts, basically from Merced to Tulare County. And with this program, we have permanent recharge basins, which have like a 15-year lifespan. So sometimes taking farm ground out of production for a while, that's a long time. But a lot of landowners are going more towards the on-farm recharge, just managing within their farm fields. And with our plans, we can fund a lot of the infrastructure needed to set up these basins. We can help, provide that cost assistance. And then, we have, if you're interested in dust control on your roads, we have incentives for that. Precision pest management, we have a variety of applications that we can use for that. Our field operations emissions reductions, we have payments for using low dust harvesters on your acreage, and then a per acre rate to encourage you to use a low dust harvester, or we have a replacement for that. And then we also have chipping, for orchard removal. And our equipment replacement, we're right around that $500 a horsepower for that 25 to 160, and the 160 and above is about $800. All
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And thanks to all our speakers. So now we're going to just have a discussion, I guess like we're in a living room, but in a room full of growers. I just wanted to start off with a softball, which is if you're a grower, you haven't really explored incentives, you haven't necessarily thought about working with one of these agencies, where might you start? How would you get going? And I'll just turn to you, Caddie. I think I'll ask you first.
Sure. Well, I think there's kind of two ways that you can go about it. If you really are starting from zero and you don't even really know what to apply for, I think getting a conservation plan could be a good way to start, either doing that through NRCS, or CDFA also has some conservation ag planning grants, and we can connect you with who does those to give you some recommendations of what kind of practices to apply for. The other thing is if you come to us and have some ideas of what you want to apply for, you just don't know how to get it funded, I think all of us who work in these incentives for growers keep in contact with each other and know the programs that are available, and we're more than happy to refer you to the right program for you. So, I work on healthy soils, but I refer people to the Air District all the time if it's a better fit, and, vice versa. So just come in and talk to us to get started.
And Kelli, I know you work with a lot of growers as well through your business. What practices have you seen be popular, and what do you say to somebody that's just walking in the door?
Yeah, so I kind of like to start with, I call them like gateway projects, right? It's like you start with like a tractor or irrigation system, and then once normally a grower sees like how easy that process is and how beneficial it is to their farm, then we start slipping into more maybe healthy soils and conservation programs, and it kind of just snowballs from there. Most growers, once they start one program, they think they're going to just come and do one, they'll realize, oh no, after that, they're like, let's do all of this, right? There's so much more out there and really taking advantage of that. So right off the get-go, obviously, equipment is huge. Anything that helps with our bottom line of our operation. Compost is a really popular one right now, just to try to, you know, improve that soil health and maybe offset a little gypsum and stuff like that.
And then you talked about these planning grants. So maybe, Caddie, could you explain a little bit more about what that process looks like? And then Jesse too, when you go out on a farm, what are the steps, and then what's the deliverable, and then how can they take that and maybe use that to apply for an incentive?
Yeah, so right now CDFA gave out, that was another of their block grant programs, so they gave out money to organizations who can come out directly to your farm, do a sort of a whole farm assessment and give you some recommendations in different areas of how to improve on different conservation practices. And I think, yeah, Jesse could speak to that better, but NRCS also has a program for that as well.
So Jesse, I've heard different stories that you can get, NRCS doesn't like to be described as an a la carte organization. So you can't just come in and say, I want some integrated pest management funding for navel orangeworm. You can say it, I don't know how successful you would be. So what's the process coming in, and do you always do a whole farm plan?
So we don't, basically the landowner, you know, our programs are voluntary, so we're looking at bringing in someone to do what is, just like Kelli mentioned, you know, starting small and kind of working your way out is always a great way to start. You know, a lot of times, you know, if you're like me and I go to a buffet, I tend to like overload that plate and I tend to grab more. Like I often try to get people to do the opposite of what I do. So like I try to get people to come in and kind of look at our programs. You know, as Caddie has mentioned, like there's so many programs out there. Like I always recommend people just come into our field office and work with staff. But we have a conservation planning, which we have soil cons at our field office that can assist with developing a whole farm plan if that's what you desire as a client, as a cooperator, or we can work on an individual field. And so that's where I like that starting small. And so sometimes like getting to know the programs, you know, just like that tractor, you know, taking, you got to replace the old piece of equipment that's still operational, but it's that highly polluting piece of equipment, and maybe it's on its last leg. You would come into the program and it kind of gets you in that start. And then as you're working with that planner, you know, that you develop a plan that's specific to your property, and you know that plan can get bigger, you know, or smaller, however it, you know, works for you.
One tip that I've heard about NRCS programs, and I'm going to look at you, Kelli, is that they like for you to address multiple resource concerns at one time. Has that been your experience in terms of once you apply? Because I have had growers that I've suggested applying and they've gotten letters back, they weren't successful in a certain funding round. Are they more successful if they, for example, if they do IPM and pollinator habitat?
Yeah, so I mean, Jesse can say like their ranking system, if you look at it, like you're gonna score higher and be higher on that list if you're doing multiple practices. So being able to add on, if it's like an irrigation system and adding maybe, you know, a moisture sensor station and reporting for 3 years and doing these different things will help that ranking score bump you on the list.
Yeah. Great job, Kelli. No, that's perfect. And our programs are competitive. You know, they're statewide programs. You know, so definitely, you know, with EQIP, we have a lot, like I said, it's kind of our umbrella practice, our umbrella program. So there's a lot of programs specific in there. And so you're competing against others that have projects like yours. And so the more resource concerns you're addressing, like the more conservation practices you have, typically the more likely you are to get funded.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's turn to Roger. So Roger, you work, I think, with the Air District and with NRCS. So if you're a grower, you want to work on an engine replacement or a low dust harvester or whole orchard recycling, how should a grower go about picking one or both of these to apply to?
Well, I think you sit down with both. Meet with the Air District, have them walk through the program, see what you could get out of it, and then meet with Jesse or whoever your county person is to see what it would be from the NRCS, and then you can make an evaluation from there as to which is the best way to go.
And then how about block grants? So we've got a lot of RCDs are represented out in the incentive zone. NRCS also has RCPPs where agencies or organizations also have these blocks of money that they're managing. So other than walking outside and talking to them, are there any other tips for how to find a block grant recipient because they do have lots of money available?
I think it's unfortunately going to be a little complicated with these block grants. I don't think there's an easy answer for it. It is new for programs like SWEEP and Healthy Soils this year that all these other organizations are getting chunks of that money to then give out. And unfortunately, each organization gets its own leeway in what kind of application it wants to put out and who's eligible. So you're welcome to come to us, and we can give you a list of everyone who's available in your county who has a block grant, and then you'll probably just have to contact each of those organizations individually for their application. But I would recommend you are able to apply to multiple at once. You can't get funded by multiple at once, but at least you can kind of put it out there and see which ones you are able to get.
Anything to add?
You know, the only thing I would say, yeah, it's going to be a little difficult, and that's one of those things, keeping in contact with your local agencies, and they'll help you through that process. But that's one of the things that a lot of my growers are like, well, I don't have time to do that, right? Like, I don't have time to spend on that. So sometimes some growers do and some don't. They don't have the staff. So that's kind of where I come into these private sector consultings, which we have few through the state, can help weed through that and know that like these ones only are going to do almond orchards. These ones are these counties. These are the requirements. Some of the block grants, it's like I've had a grower and she essentially was like, Kelly, like I called them, they're covering our county, but I don't qualify because I'm over 500 acres. And it's like, but this doesn't say anything on the website about that. So it's going to be a lot of like cold calling and trying to figure it out. And the block grant system through CDFA is not going to cover all the counties. So you're going to have to go more of those traditional routes of directly through the state.
So for the meantime, applying to the CDFA programs, you got to find the individual organization or apply to CDFA directly. In the case of NRCS, you come, you do your whole farm plan, you fill out the application. Can you just check a box and say, if I qualify for EQIP's Conservation Stewardship Program, RCPP, it's a lot of alphabet soup out there. Is that an option?
That is an option. And so that's where like your planner, your field office staff is going to be the hand on the ground, that's the boots on the ground that's going to help you with that application. And they're going to help you get the programs that fit you. And so a lot of our conservation desktop, the way that we're going with our programs, now you're going to be putting the more pots of potential funding. But as you're working through that plan, the planner is going to be working on identifying the potential sources of funding. And so the advantage of like an RCPP is that it's focused funding. And so like that pollinator partnership, it's just on pollinators. And so that's money solely for that. And so that if that's your focus, like that's where you're really going to want to get, because you're going to be more competitive because you're not competing with everybody that has their irrigation, their orchard removal, all these other things that they're doing. Unless you're doing those as well, then that's where some of our partnership programs really help.
Yeah, so you said pollinator partnership. I know they have a booth on the expo floor. NRCS is also on the expo floor. And then American Farmland Trust is here. They've got one of these RCPPs. But I'd say it's still a good idea if you're a grower to advocate for yourself when you come in and really say, I want to apply for every program I can. One of the confusing ones, to be honest, has been the Conservation Stewardship Program. It's not one, everybody, I think for the most part, knows EQIP. What is CSP, and what's, especially for growers that have already done a lot of these projects, are they subject to, for example, the Farm Bill cap? Maybe they've already expended all the money under EQIP. Can they apply for more money through CSP?
So CSP is an additional 200,000 on top of that 450 cap for equip. You know, that program is like you're developing enhancements. So like, you know, like somebody that's already came through a lot of equip practices and stuff, typically they're gonna have like enhancements that they could do on their farm for like additional monitoring, like IPM management. You know, so doing more intensive monitoring on the farm a lot of times is what that goes into. You know, soil water, soil monitoring for moisture. You know, so we have the soil moisture sensors. There's a lot of, you know, like we have low dust harvest under our conservation stewardship program. And so you already kind of have to meet a certain threshold to be admitted, like to get into the conservation stewardship program. But it does allow for an additional $200,000 with that enhancement. And so, and one thing with that program is if you're a small farmer, we used to have a lower, you know, annual payment of $1,500. Now that's $4,000 minimum. You know, so those smaller farms of 10 acres or so, you know, if you're in CSP, if you're doing that conservation stewardship, you can receive a higher minimum payment through the program.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. It's a reward for doing things well and then trying to figure out, the Almond Board talks a lot about continual improvement. You know, how can you continue to improve your operation? Aaron, so you've had some experience now working with NRCS in their pilot groundwater recharge program. How's that experience been? And is there an opportunity to potentially take this statewide? And then I'm gonna ask Roger, do you think, or others, is there a way we could get this into any state funding?
Yeah, we initially, the first pilot came out in 2022. I was talking with Jesse. You have to think about it, the perspective of what we were looking at. We were looking at droughts. So the first year was not really too, our growers didn't get too engaged, but I think this year we had another round, and I have some support staff that their sole purpose is to direct growers. So I have a staff that could help also in my office. You come to us and we help you, what are you trying to do? And then we try and funnel you to the various sources. So we had a huge amount of interest this year with the wet year and the two programs that they're offering, the on-farm and the recharge basin. I would say 90% of it was the on-farm recharge activity because we were doing it. And so you get a little bit of funding for doing the recharge effort, and then you get credit for it on our water dashboard. So it's a win-win incentive. So we're doubling up the incentive essentially. So the NRCS pays for the water supply, and then the grower gets the credit. I think it's a huge step forward for winter irrigation and over irrigation for recharge efforts. On the other side of it, and just you kind of pointed to it, you can attach other projects onto the recharge project. So if you needed a pipeline to get the water over to your field, or you needed a meter so that we can measure it, or those sort of things. So we love working with the NRCS, and I think you've heard it here. When they come in, we send them over to the NRCS office. It's kind of like hand-holding, and we just get those growers to the most efficient. And again, what we're moving towards is not all, across the board, we're not putting in drip everywhere. We're putting drip and flood back in. So we have growers putting flood systems back in where they took them out so they can do this groundwater recharge effort. And so that's where I see this thing going. I do see it being a statewide practice. It's got to be if we're going to survive Sigma. And I didn't realize coming to these events like this, I live in my little bubble down there in Tulare. And as I went across the state, I didn't realize just how much recharge is not a familiar conversation. In other realms, it's flood, it's nuisance, it's get it off my property, it's going to cause a problem. In our neck of the woods, it's going to be a way we operated for the last 100 years and for the next 100 years.
And what's the potential to take recharge incentives statewide? I think you've talked about how there are unique opportunities within the district to incentivize good actions. So it's whether it's recharge or other things. So how can you do this maybe even for some of these areas that aren't a part of the NRCS recharge pilot? How can those GSAs incentivize recharge?
And I want to be really careful because I was I've talked to others, and I've been told, Aaron, just shut up about this allocation system. Like it's not universally understood or accepted, and that's the way we found just organically an incentive program in itself. However, I've heard a lot of other creative models of irrigation districts paying growers to put the water in the ground. I don't know how the credits are being allocated, and that you can theoretically do that without the allocation system, and you don't need the water tracking and all that other kind of stuff, because I'm going to pay a grower to put the water in the ground. It accrues to the benefit of everybody. I think that's a good practice, but to get it out statewide, I think, and I hate to do this, but I think you growers need to start working with your irrigation districts and saying, I need this, I want this, and I think it's healthy. And otherwise, if we avoid this conversation, there will be those that, you know, us irrigation districts have enough on our plates and our GSAs. But if we're going to get this winter, say we hit another wet year again, everybody's going to want to spool up as fast as possible. And I think to the growers' benefit, you guys are going to need the credits. So I'd begin having those conversations.
Looking out, we know California doesn't yet incentivize recharge the way that, say, through sweep, that NRCS does. At the same time, we know that California is facing a tough budgetary time. Roger, I think you've been taking a close look at California's budget. You've looked at the incentive programs that are currently funded or might come in the future. Can you read the tea leaves for us and tell us what you see coming?
Yeah, great. Boy, that's a tough question. It's this coming year. It's a $58 billion question, to be honest with you. But you're faced with two challenges. One, probably our toughest budget deficit we've ever faced, and then the second part is you have relatively 33 new legislators, and you've got new leadership both in the Assembly and the Senate. In May, I was having dinner with one of the new assemblymen, and through the course of dinner, we're talking about all the issues, and at the end, he goes, Roger, you keep saying this word Sigma. What is that? And I'm thinking to myself, how in the world today could somebody not know what Sigma is? But that's reality, and we're out here trying to lobby for this money, and they don't even know what the word is. We've got a huge challenge ahead of us. That being said, we had, and I can't see who's out there, so who cares? We had an assembly speaker who just frankly didn't care about agriculture. We have one now that does care about agriculture. So we'll see kind of Speaker Rivas what his impact is, and I'll come back to him in a minute. On the Senate side, you're also changing the leadership here in February. Senator Toni Atkins did care about agriculture. She was, in fact, it's the only reason we have farmer funding this year was because of Senator Atkins made it a priority. Senator McGuire is going to take her spot in February. I think he'll be supportive of ag, but the proof's in the pudding. We'll have to see. We met with Speaker Rivas here about a month ago on this very issue. And we didn't know the number, but we knew based on this year and going into next year, the budget wasn't going to get any better. And we were already hearing that we were going to probably be worse off than we thought. He acknowledged that. But we also told him, said, look, this state has a lot of ambitious goals, whether it's meeting Sigma on that side or the climate change goals that they have and the air quality stuff on the other side. You can't have those goals and not help us. We said that flat out. And Speaker Rivas agreed with us. So I think at least on the surface, we've got people that support it, but the bottom line is, and I've talked to several agencies in the last week, every agency, because as you know, they're already going through the budget process now, and they'll come out in January with a preliminary budget. Every office has been asked to cut. And we're over here, not forget about the agencies, we're looking for additional incentive funds. This is going to be our most challenging ever. But the reality is, and we've educated them to look, farming drives a lot of the economy here in California, and if we don't have a viable farming economy, where's the state going to be? And so, I think a lot of people get that, but bottom line is, where are we going to be financially? I don't know. Yeah. We asked for $800 million in GSA funding for this last year for several projects throughout the state. We got $200 million. We got a big deficit there just for all the projects that are already out there, let alone additional. So it's a big challenge coming our way.
Well, I guess the good news is that has already been allocated a lot of state funding that's going to go into the block grant programs. And there's also a lot of new federal funding that's coming in through the Inflation Reduction Act. So, Kelli, I don't know if you've taken a look at this, if you know what's going to qualify as part of that funding through NRCS, or
yeah, I think it's going to be a lot. Like, we were so relied a little bit for a while on the state money, and now we're going to be really switching and focusing federally. And the pots kind of change, right? And then at that time, you know, state didn't have money and NRCS had more money. So it really is just playing that game and figuring out, where should I go? Where should I apply? And you know, to your point, like, we need to have our voice heard. As every grower in this room, you have a voice. And if you want to see this funding continue, you can help us and help organizations. You know, the Almond Alliance does a great job on voicing and getting us funding. You know, they're, you know, the pioneers of land flex, right? You know, being able to do, you know, get paid for recharge and things like that projects in the state of California during a deficit was, you know, really big, and getting those parties together. And legislators want to hear a voice. You know, right now, you know, we're going to work with the Women Caucus to try to get them to understand and see what we do and how important the bee pollination and habitat is in the state of California, and how much of an impact it makes if we don't have funding to provide that for them. So we need funding, healthy soils, and pollinator partnership programs to help with that. It also is going to help with us regulations and meeting those requirements that are coming down, that bees are now fish and now they're protected, right? And the monarchs are going to be protected. How do we protect ourselves against the environmentalists? How do we, you know, if we take a bee, that we're not going to get, you know, taken to jail, essentially. So these programs are going to allow us to essentially keep us safe and keep us moving in the right direction without doing more harm than good.
Jesse, there's also, and Roger, I don't know if you want to weigh in, but you know, there's been a lot of discussion about putting a water bond out there, and it seems to ebb and flow, and we'll need you growers to stand with us as we put the pressure on the state to ensure that there's a water bond. Now, that's one thing, and then getting the water bond and making sure the water bond gets effectively put out there. But, you know, us in the water world have been, and in the ag world, have been lobbying for, you know, billions of dollars in that water bond. We have another, and the governor, knowing that the creditworthiness of the state is at jeopardy, you know, we need to push that bond and not let it slide off the table.
Well, I have one more question. I think that before I go look at what people have been sending in. So if this has sparked any thoughts in your mind, please write something down on a Post-it, raise your hand, hand it to an almond board staff. Another tip is stacking different programs on top of each other. But there are a lot of different rules for how can you do that. What programs allow that to happen? If you want to do low dust harvesting, can you use both the Air District funding and NRCS and other types of programs like that? So maybe we'll start with you, Jesse. How does stacking work with NRCS and California funding?
Okay, so it's nuanced. With the equipment replacement, you can't stack the funding. With orchard chipping, you can go to the state program and come to ours, but you just need to identify that you're getting funding through NRCS, because the state can only pay up to 80%, you know, of that chipping cost. You know, our payments are cost assistance. You know, looking at 75% of the cost assistance. So sometimes they're going to pay more than than that 80% is, and so then the state's going to be, they're not going to be able to assist. In the case of a low dust harvester, this is where, like, that's, if you replaced a low dust harvester with the state, this is where our conservation stewardship program would be a really good program to come into, because then we're going to incentivize you to use that piece of equipment on your acreage for harvest. And so that's where, and that conservation stewardship, that's a 5-year so you're getting payments over a 5-year period. So, and if you already have that low dust harvest or you just got it, that's where we're, maybe when you purchased that, you were on 20 acres, and so maybe you're going to expand it to the 40 acres or 60 acres of almonds.
And Caddie, how about with healthy soils or sweep? Do you see a lot of people applying to both programs and getting funding from both programs?
Yeah, I'd say it's nuanced. There is some ability to do stacking with the CDFA programs, but I think timing becomes the biggest issue, is actually applying to multiple programs and getting them both at the same time is difficult, but it can be possible. Definitely, orchard chipping was mentioned. A lot of people will go with the Air District and healthy soils and stack with both of those. And also things like cover cropping. You can go to an organization like Seeds for Bees and get free cover crop seeds and then get paid to do cover cropping under healthy soils. So there is some ability to do that, and we're certainly happy to help figure that out, but it can be difficult with timing of all of these different programs and opening and closing dates.
Yeah. I think what's great about NRCS, and I know we've done, is you get funded to put an irrigation system in essentially through EQIP, and then 2 years later, a year later, you're rolling into CSP, right? And so being able to extend some payments out beyond a practice you already did with them, it's really just building and rewarding you for doing good stuff. So if you're getting funded through that or through SWEEP or Healthy Soils and then going and stacking that CSP for essentially just keeping records is what it comes down to. They're paying you to provide records of what you're doing, which 90% of the records that they request you're already keeping, so it's not that much work out of it. It's just being a little bit more organized. So they're paying you to be a little organized with your paperwork, which is probably a good thing. We actually have found it very beneficial in the long run. At first it was and everyone wasn't happy about it, but now we're like, oh, this is great, right? And creating just a better record system. So that's been a really helpful tool on our farm to have just that extra income to, hey, we got extra little income, let's put in some more weather stations, monitoring, just making it a little easier on our farm, or hey, we got a little extra, let's pay for this year. So getting, my husband has a small parcel and it's 23 acres and getting, 15, 20,000 a year, depending on what we're doing extra, is a lot of money to go, quite a ways.
Okay, well, thanks for that explanation. Not an easy process, but certainly something to look at, because as a grower, you don't want to leave money on the table. So if you have an opportunity to apply to multiple programs and sort of maximize that, certainly something to explore. I want to start bringing in some of the questions from the audience. And first, I think this would be to Jesse. Could you shed some more light on the funding that NRCS has that's associated with navel orangeworm mating disruption?
Yes, so that's our IPM practice 595. So it's in our cropland fund pool, like that we have that available. So definitely just it's available, it's there. We have multiple monitoring techniques. Like we have agronomists that you'd work with to like kind of develop a strategy, with your PCA. But definitely come in and sign up, for programs if you're interested. It's under our EQIP program and CSP.
And the Almond Board got a DPR grant, which is really asking growers if they're interested in doing mating disruption as neighborhood blocks. And we've had over 30,000 acres sign up, over 70 growers, and there is a lot of interest, and NRCS has come out to some of these grower meetings, and hopefully we'll hold more of these joint NRCS and grower meetings in the future, just to publicize that more, because I think it is top of mind for growers after the year that we've had with navel orangeworm.
Yeah, I would say on that, it has been effective. So we've been using that system in our area, and we had a high pressure this year. And so I came to the neighborhood and was like, hey, we got an issue. We can't do this on our own. We all are dealing with this problem. We got to come together. So I have no problem, doing the applications for us because it's going to affect all of us. So we essentially, as a neighborhood, there's about 7 growers that have all signed up at the same time for IPM to try to make it as most effective as possible through NRCS.
So I've got a question, pretty specific, but I think it builds on something that still it's worth digging into. We're starting whole orchard recycling in January. Can we apply for grants to multiple organizations? So I think right off the bat, one of the challenges here is that agencies won't pay for a practice for the most part, except for CSP, that you've already done. Is there an opportunity before January, I guess, to get a grant?
Our application deadline is February. So I mean, you would definitely have to hold off on that chipping until you received a contract with us. And so CSP is kind of, you're still not really you've initiated some of it. So you're doing conservation on the ground, and so the new practices you're adding to what you're already doing with conservation stewardship. But with the chipping of an orchard in January, you definitely, it wouldn't be, for our funding, you wouldn't be able to get your paperwork in time to get the funding available.
So points towards thinking a little bit longer term, but sometimes the needs on the farm, getting those things done outweigh, I guess, waiting for one of these grant programs to come in.
Right.
Caddie, how quickly do you think some of these block grant recipients might be able to turn it around, or what's the fastest way if you want to do whole orchard recycling? We've got CDFA, we've got the Air District, and we've got NRCS.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately a lot of our programs are not known for being a fast turnaround. So you would have to think a little bit more in advance, but I would encourage, there are different funding sources for some of these practices, so apply to all of them and see which one you get first, what works better for the timing on your farm, or if you get multiple at the same time. So, but you do need to think a little bit in advance to figure out when these programs are open. But yeah, the block grants, I think, throughout next year will be opening. We're not sure exactly which dates, but it's definitely not a fast turnaround.
Here's a general thing. Any thoughts on what are the tax impacts if you're receiving these funds? Are they treated like income?
All grants are considered income. So essentially, being smart too when you do the practices. And that's why I always work with my growers to make sure that we're, if we need to hold off and purchase after January, maybe a piece of equipment, so that turnaround payment's coming in that same year, so it can wash in the books on our taxes, and being really smart with that, because definitely, receiving, spending a bunch of money one year and receiving it the next year or vice versa can get kind of tricky on your taxes. So it is, all grant money is considered taxable. You will get 1099'd on it. So make sure to consider that when you're doing your process. And working with your local, your accountant to make sure that you may be on a tractor because it paid for so much, right, 85%, and you're essentially putting 85% down on that tractor, taking that lump sum on that piece of equipment on your depreciation instead of depreciating it out.
And then as long as we're on this topic of income, NRCS caps, growers can't apply if they're above a certain amount. But there may be exceptions. And then, Caddie, I don't think the state programs have any caps. So could you talk about any exceptions? And then, Caddie, how does the state look at that? Because it seems like if you don't qualify for NRCS, maybe you would qualify for the state.
Right. And so our adjusted gross income is $900,000. So anything below $900,000 or below, you're eligible for our programs. So however your entity's set up, as long as you're 900,000 or less. We do our regional conservation priority partnership program, that the pollinator partnership that I was talking about. That program has a AGI waiver for it. So, because the whole purpose of that program is to get people to adapt those practices. And so that is something that, like with an IPM, if the almond industry is really interested in doing like those IPMs, maybe a regional conservation partnership program is the way to go if the funding is available to set up kind of a block grant style for funding specific, because then you can get more specific with how that funding is needed.
Well, I know the RCPP, that the Pollinator Partnership, I think, is one of the first programs that actually includes integrated pest management within the RCPP, but certainly there's a lot of money coming in and could be more opportunities regionally for other parts of the state or areas of interest to apply for one of those. I'm going to go back to Aaron for a moment here. Concerning groundwater recharge, are there studies to establish the efficiencies and figure out how much of what you apply is actually getting to the groundwater?
We're working on that now, and it's part of the GSA's responsibility to monitor that, and so we're installing dedicated monitoring wells throughout the district in our GSA. We're doing it slowly because, interestingly enough, monitoring wells seem to be sometimes more expensive than wells, water wells. And so we've got, I think, a host of 5 or 6 with dedicated monitoring nested in upper and lower, so we're tracking that now. I am not aware of any study currently. And then the last layer that we're throwing on the top of our monitoring is a very elaborate hydrologic or a hydrogeologic model that will incorporate a lot of the new data that we have in our area. We are one of the early adopters of the SkyTem imaging system that looks at all the soil lithography from about ground surface down to about 1,500 feet. And then our district has purchased a totem unit, which can now go in kind of surgically onto each field and seek down about the first 200 feet in very granular foot-by-foot sand and clay. We're incorporating that into that model and then throwing the like 2023's surface water applications over the top, and we'll see how the groundwater levels respond. But specifically a study by like a university, I'm not quite sure of any.
Here's kind of a comment and a question. Almond growers are educated and progressive. They're already doing many things that should be incentivized. Do you think they're leaving a lot of money on the table? It's a loaded question, I guess.
I know, it is a little loaded.
To me, it's being a part of who you are as a farmer, and you often get accused of not doing the right thing, but the growers that I work with are always waking up in the morning trying to strive to be the best farmer they can. And if you don't have a healthy environment, your crop is not going to survive. It's just the optics in the state of California don't favor you right now. So yeah, it's hard to say whether you're leaving money on the table.
Well, let's put it a different way. Are there things that you think the almond growers or almond industry or the almond board can do to further facilitate this, making these connections between our growers and these funding agencies, and really maybe simplifying the process, making us more successful? I think we have actually received a lot of money through SWEEP, through Healthy Soils. We are seeing a lot of projects in air quality and through Sigma projects going out on the ground. But any thoughts on next steps?
I do know, like, currently, one of the things that every one of us is asking right now is where our PARP money is. We have not got our disaster money from PARP. We've opened 2022. Where is that money? So we're working right now with the Almond Alliance, and we've put in a request to DC, and we're knocking some doors down to try to figure out where that money is and shake it loose, because state or federal is saying one thing and DC and the state offices are like, it's whispers, we haven't heard where that money's coming from. So being able to have a partnership in the almond industry, like the Almond Alliance, it can go and lobby and fight for things like that for us is really powerful. And so I know that that's how we were able to get the 2022 released. Aubrey's team's amazing about doing stuff like that for us, where as the almond board, we can't do that because we're a marketing order, but being able to use that more political arm to shake loose some of that money for us is really great.
So you mentioned the Almond Alliance, and I just want to turn to pollinators for a second. Caddie, can you just, I know that a lot of the money that's out there in these block grants is for pollinators. We talked about recharge basins. I know cover crops can help with infiltration. Anything else you would say as far as what should growers be thinking about in the pollinator space?
Yeah, there's a lot of funding right now for pollinator habitat. There's, you can get it funded through NRCS, through the Healthy Soils Program. There's new block grants, again, through CDFA for pollinator habitat programs, and we have some folks out there who are recipients of those grants, which can provide money for, things like cover crops, but also more permanent habitats like hedgerows. And so there's a lot of different opportunities if that's something you're interested in.
And then how do you take advantage of the technical service providers? Such as we've got the Pollinator Alliance here. What types of services are they going to do when they come out to the farm? How are they going to help you?
Yeah, well, I think it's really great because, a lot of folks you don't know, they're going to tell you to put in a native species hedgerow, but like what native species are good in your area? Where do you even buy those plants? And I think that's where some of that assistance comes in. They can come out, walk the space with you where you're thinking about putting in that habitat, what your goals are, and give you a whole plan of recommended plants and also where to actually source those from. And then they can actually help you pay for that as well.
And Roger, I think I might give you the last question, unless there's any burning questions from the audience, which is, we've talked a lot about growers, but facilities, handlers, hullers, shellers, there's also a lot of money out there for them. Could you just briefly tell us what types of projects do you think, and then also what challenges are there going to be to getting a lot of these zero emission vehicles and out on the road?
So, yeah, a lot of the same funding, like the tractor replacement, we replaced loaders at the hullers. You talked about stacked. We did a program 4 years ago now where we stacked federal DERA money, which is Diesel Emission Reduction Act money, on top of core funding from the state, which is for off-road. And we actually were able to purchase 17 electric yard trucks at our hullers and processors. And practically, I don't like talking about too much, but it paid for more than 90% of the cost of the truck. We've since, that funding's very limited to get both to coincide at the same time. We did a couple more, or 3 more a year ago, and we're now, as a matter of fact, trying to get to another. We've got a list of over 200 trucks that we're trying to do that. So I think that's certainly an opportunity. Going forward on the electric part, you're absolutely right. That's a big challenge because it's not just the truck or the vehicle. We're staring down the barrel of an electric forklift rule, which is going to be heard next year. The draft is out right now. We've got some time for ag. We've got additional 3 years beyond what everybody else has, but there's going to be a rule. The unfortunate thing is there's never been funding for us to help do that. And that funding, we're lobbying this next year again in a difficult year, trying to find funding for electric forklifts. So it's on the table, but we've got a long way to go.
Okay, well, I wish we had more time, plenty more topics, but I want to just take this moment to thank our speakers. Thank you very much.